Welcome back. Today we are talking House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 3. It aired on Sunday night and we're going to break it all down. We're going to talk about it all. Obviously, spoiler warning, please don't watch this video if you've not seen the episode. I would feel crap if something was ruined because there's a lot to talk about. A lot. The first thing is that in the opening credits, we got this image. So obviously, as things progress, we're going to see more and more things. This is obviously little Jaehaerys. I've got to say, I do love the opening credits. I do. I like them more than season 1. I liked that one with the blood and everything. That was cool. But there was just something about the new credits with the tapestry vibe. I loved it. And I'm excited to see more events depicted in the tapestry. Again, the theme is the weaving of the Targaryen histories. And yeah, blood and cheese. How are we feeling after that? Okay, so the first proper scene opens up and we're in the Riverlands and you've got these two sides. You've got House Bracken and House Blackwood. And there's a dispute over where the line is between their territories. Now, the Brackens and the Blackwoods, they've been beefing for generations and generations. So this is nothing new. But the difference is, in this context, the Brackens have sided with Aegon, so they are Team Green, and the Blackwoods have sided with Rhaenyra, Team Black. And the boy from House Bracken, he calls Rhaenyra a baby killer. And obviously, the kid from House Blackwood, he ain't having any of that. The thing that bothers me about this is it just goes to show that one rumour can escalate into a huge thing. And now Rhaenyra has a PR crisis on her hands because some people in the realm will believe what they are told, even though we know that she had nothing to do with it. Now, what happens with these two groups is called the Battle of the Burning Mill. Apparently, that's the episode title as well, even though we don't see the battle, it happens off screen. I'd have liked to have seen it. Moving on to Dragonstone, and we see the Cargyle twins together at last in a grave. They're being buried respectfully, and this is the thing. Rhaenyra is a good person. She knows the right thing to do is to bury them together. That's what they would have wanted. She doesn't see Arik as her enemy. She understands that this is a tragedy. It's a very sad situation. I don't think Aegon would be quite so gracious. Rhaenyra says, I can't fault him for keeping his oath, and this is why I am pro Rhaenyra. We get brilliant interactions between Rhaenys and Rhaenyra. Honestly, when these two share a scene, I love it. And it's because Rhaenys can empathise with Rhaenyra. She's been in her shoes. She knows how it feels to be a woman and to not be good enough. And the thing with Rhaenys is she's had a long time to process her feelings, and she's come to a place where, not that she's okay with it, but she's kind of put that dream away in a little box and she doesn't want to get it out anymore. This is why she chastised Corlys and said, just let it be. It's not my dream anymore. She knows that ship has sailed, but she's also got wisdom and experience on her side, and that she can use to help Rhaenyra. Rhaenys says something that really sums up the problem with this war, which is that it's starting to become about something else. It's not so much about who should sit on the Iron Throne. It's becoming more about, well, who can get vengeance better than the other one? Who can come out on top? It's not really about the actual issues. It's now becoming personal. It's revenge. People are losing sight of what is really important. Now, Rhaenyra says something interesting, and it sort of foreshadows the entire episode. She says that she doesn't think Alicent really wants this war. So within Rhaenyra, there is still hope. But she's conflicted. She's received this letter from Alicent. She's not opening it. It's all just a bit too much. For Rhaenyra, there is still that sense of betrayal. There's just a lot of pain there. Rhaenys says there is no war so hateful to the gods as a war between kin, and no war so bloody as a war between dragons. Rhaenys' opinion that it's not actually Alicent doing all of this, it's the men around her. And that is true to a degree, because Alicent is serving the men. But at the same time, we have seen in her private interactions just how ambitious Alicent really is, and how she is wanting her and Otto to run the show behind the scenes. So, Rhaenys is not 100% spot on there. She is right, but that's not the entire story. Now, Rhaenys is trying to tell Rhaenyra, look, Alicent is not the one driving this. I don't know if I agree with that. Not really, not 100%. Alicent does not want this, but at the same time, she's really not willing to back down and back Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra, she's dealing with all of these emotions. She's still in shock at the attack on Dragonstone. She's fearing for the safety of herself and her children. There's a lot going on. Daemon is not there. It's a lot to process, and she can't bring herself to open Alicent's letter. Not yet. She does not want to hear what Alicent has to say. And Rhaenys understands loss, death, grief. She does not want to perpetuate the tragedies that have already happened. So she urges Rhaenyra to do whatever you can, bring this to a close in any way, shape, or form. And the avenue for that might be going through Alicent, using that old bond, that old friendship, seeing if there's anything still there to get you both on the same page so that the women can sort everything out, because the men are fucking everything up. This is really hard for Rhaenyra because she was close to Alicent for a long time in the show. And that hurts because the person you cared for, the person you loved, they are the ones that you are at odds with. And it's horrible when you've fallen out with somebody or you're not vibing with somebody. Just the thought of them, it's not a pleasant feeling. So my heart goes out to Alicent and Rhaenyra because in one sense, they are both victims in the greater game. There is one thing that it irks me a bit about this scene and about Rhaenyra even contemplating speaking to Alicent. On the one hand, yes, when you take the emotions out of it, it is a pragmatic move. It's a smart, strategic move in the middle of a war to negotiate with your enemies to potentially bring this to a close. I understand that side of things, but at the same time, it does feel constantly like Rhaenyra has to take the high road. She has to extend the olive branch. I don't agree with that. I don't think that is fair. But at the same time, it's almost not really about what is fair. It's about what's best for the realm, for Rhaenyra's family. She might have to eat crow. If that's what it takes, she'll do it if it saves the lives of her family. But on principle, I don't like the idea of Rhaenyra having to come begging and asking for someone to do the right thing. And no one is doing that for Rhaenyra. That irks me. Anyway, moving on, we are in King's Landing and we see Sir Criston Cole. He's walking along, heading towards the Green Council. I don't know if it was just me, but I did get the vibe that the other members of the Kingsguard were firstly Aegon's mates. Like he just rounded up his pals and were like, yeah, you can be in the Kingsguard, whatever. I don't think he thought it through. Also, they were just lounging around. And the Lord Commander appears and they sort of just get up whenever they feel like it. It was a bit, I don't know. I couldn't tell if it was a disrespect thing or whether they were just young and naive and didn't really understand the duty of being a Kingsguard. But there was a little something there, I'm just saying. Now, we're in the middle of this Green Council meeting. Everyone's getting frustrated. Aegon is frustrated, so is Alicent, so is Aemond. Everyone's kind of squabbling. Everyone's throwing in their 2 cents. There's major discord in Team Green because everyone has an idea of what they should do, but no one really wants to be the one to put their neck on the line in case it blows up in their face. And we see a similar dynamic with Rhaenyra, where her lords are urging her to do this, that, and the other. So there's a lot of interesting insights into how Team Green and Team Black handle the dissension in the ranks. They're talking about having new guards appointed to the Kingsguard, and Alicent takes it on board to say that the reason why you're needing to replace people is because your scheme to send Sir Arryk to Dragonstone was rash. And she's not wrong. We're beginning to see cracks in the relationship between Criston Cole and Alicent. Like, they are not They're not a good fit. I feel like Kristen Cole and Alicent first joined forces because they had a mutual enemy. It was the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. They both had beef with Rhaenyra, and that's what drew them together. But as time goes on, they're starting to discover, I don't know, they're not exactly on the same page. She does not seem happy with him taking on this extra responsibility. It's almost like he's getting carried away. So it comes to this point where Kristen Cole says the Riverlands are the key to the war, and he's going to go and take Harrenhal. And going back to Kristen Cole and Alicent, kind of, a bit of friction there. He's basically talking like, oh, it's no big deal, I'll just take Harrenhal. And she's looking at him like, it's not going to be that simple. And so that is an interesting dynamic to keep an eye on. And actually, Kristen Cole kind of reverts to Aegon and says, well, what do you think, my king? And he sort of throws Alicent under the bus a little bit, which is very interesting. We learn that Aemond will stay in the capital with Vhagar, patrolling the skies around King's Landing, and Aegon is going to go with Sir Criston to the Riverlands with his dragon Sunfire. Now, it's very interesting that Aegon proffered his involvement because, yes, on the one hand, it's like that scene during the Battle of Blackwater Bay with Joffrey. The king has to be seen to be involved. You can't be hiding behind the castle walls. However, Aegon's just suffered an extreme loss with his son. There's a lot going on. He's young, he's inexperienced, he's naive. And Alicent is hearing him say, yeah, I'll just fly into battle with my dragon. Yeah, it'll be no problem. I'll be back in time for dinner. Like, that is his attitude. He's a little too glib. Like, oh, off to war we go. And that is literally like a dagger in Alicent's heart because that is her firstborn child. She does not want anything bad to happen to him. And he's acting like it's not scary and it's not serious. And it is. But I do think Aegon, he feels like he's got to prove himself because, and this is just my interpretation, actually it's my video so I can say what the fuck I want. My interpretation is that Aegon, he's always had that chip on his shoulder because he wasn't quite good enough for his father. There was always something missing because according to his mother and grandfather, Aegon should be the heir to the throne. And in Viserys' eyes, he wasn't. So that's got to feel crap if you're Aegon. Interesting thing about Aegon is him putting himself forward, saying, I'm going to go off to war. It's almost like he's overcompensating a little bit because he does have a chip on his shoulder. Because in his father's eyes, he wasn't good enough. Rhaenyra came first, and nothing anyone could ever do would change Viserys' mind in favour of Aegon. And even if Aegon did not want the Iron Throne, that's still not a nice feeling to feel not good enough. And so this is his chance to really flex his muscles and show what he's made of. The problem is, he doesn't realise what he's getting himself into. Next, we're at Dragonstone, and we get another fabulous interaction between Rhaenyra and Mysaria. Now, I've got to give Mysaria a big shout out here because she basically says to Rhaenyra, look, you could have done whatever you wanted with me, and you didn't. You showed me grace. I will return that in kind. How can I help you? Because you didn't have to treat me well. But you did, you set me free. And obviously we know she saved Rhaenyra's life by coming back and saying, raising the alarm about Sir Aric coming to infiltrate the castle. Basically, they could be besties, maybe, under a different circumstance. Basically, she says, I want a place at your court. You didn't have to extend kindness to me, but you did. And I'm going to repay that in whatever way I can. And Rhaenyra knows what Mysaria's assets are, so she says, I need you to tell me about how easy it is to get into King's Landing. And Mysaria is like, I know how to get into King's Landing. And what's interesting is Mysaria's concern is for the small folk. And it's because she's part of the small folk. She's come from nothing. She gets it. She understands that they are the ones who will really suffer. And this is the thing. You didn't have to extend kindness to me, but you did. And I'm going to repay that in whatever way I can. And Rhaenyra knows what Mysaria's assets are. So she says, I need you to tell me about how easy it is to get into King's Landing. And Mysaria is like, I know how to get into King's Landing. She says to Rhaenyra, look, one of you showed me mercy. One side showed me a kindness. And you didn't have to. in the background of this scene, we have a dragon flying over the bay, and Rhaenyra says it's sea smoke. And it's the dragon that belonged to Laenor Velaryon, and on the show, he abandoned sea smoke, season 1. But what's interesting is Massaria, she's like, sea smoke seems a little restless, and then it dawns on Rhaenyra that the reason why sea smoke could be restless is because the bond between dragon and rider has been severed. Possibly Laenor has died off screen, and we know that that bond it's very symbiotic. The dragon and the rider, they feel the other person's pain. So losing your rider is going to make a dragon very restless indeed. And I'm glad we got that little nod to that, because it will make sense for future events. But it's also interesting that, Rhaenyra was sad because she loved Laenor, not in a romantic way, but she cared a lot for him. And she said, you are a good man. So I think she is mourning him. The next scene is Rhaena and Rhaenyra inside Dragonstone. Firstly, I love just seeing more of the interiors of these different castles. Like on Game of Thrones, we didn't really get to see much of Dragonstone. We saw bits, but not a lot. Same with Harrenhal. We saw it not in the best light. We saw bits of Harrenhal, but it's nice to see it again and see different perspectives. Now, the crux of this conversation is Rhaenyra is asking Rhaena, I need you to step up. I need you to do something for me for the sake of our family, which is to accompany Joffrey and the little kids. They can't be here. Not when Dragonstone has come under attack. I've got to put their safety first. And she's basically asking Rhaena to be the mother that she cannot be to her children at this point. So she's asking Rhaena, will you do this? And there's no way Rhaena would say no, absolutely not. But it's also a lot to carry on your shoulders, especially with some of the dragon eggs that she'll be taking. Rhaena has a lot of responsibility, and it's not easy. But she's not hesitating for a second because she loves Rhaenyra and she loves her family. Next, we jump to Harrenhal, where we see Daemon flying in on Caraxes in the middle of this wild thunderstorm. Like, it's pouring down, and it really did add to the ambiance. It felt very creepy, it was eerie and spooky, because the majority of Harrenhal is a ruin. There's only some areas that you can live in, because Aegon the Conqueror, on the back of Balerion the Black Dread, he burnt this castle to a crisp during the conquest, and it's never been restored. So Daemon, in full armor, looking fabulous, we get to see this incredible sequence of him making his way through the different areas of the castle, and we've got some great cinematography in this moment. And it culminates with him bursting into this room where Sir Simon Strong, the Castellan of Harrenhal, is residing, having dinner, actually. He is the uncle of Lionel Strong, R.I.P., great uncle to Harwin, R.I.P., and Larys Strong. Now, I loved Simon Strong. Hats off to Simon Russell Beale, who portrayed him. I thought he did brilliant. He was very charismatic. He was charming. I was here for it. Immediately, he bends the knee to Daemon and says, the castle is yours. Welcome to Harrenhal. So they're all sitting there having dinner, and Daemon is kind of prodding around at his plate, like he's too worried about poisoned peas. But that was my thought. I was like, I wouldn't eat shit that they gave me, just in case. But Simon Strong reveals that there's actually a big beef within the Strong family. He's not a fan of Larys, who is now Lord Strong, because he believes that there was something dodgy. I mean, we know it was, but he doesn't at the time. He thinks Larys had something to do with the demise of his nephew Lionel and great-nephew Sir Harwin, and he would be right. Matt Smith had said how much he loved working with Simon Russell Beale, and it really did show. Like, this scene, it felt classic Game of Thrones. It felt like the way that people used to write for Tyrion. Those dynamics, I loved it, and I was very much here for their interaction, and I hope to see more of that. Yeah, that entire scene, I could have watched it over and over and over. Okay, so now we're back in the capital, in King's Landing, and we meet Gwaine Hightower. Alicent's brother, played by Freddie Fox. Now, instantly, I was like, okay, I'm not meant to like the Hightowers, but I like this one because he was reading Sir Coleslaw for filth. I was very here for it. He basically comments on Sir Criston Cole's rise all the way from nobody to now not just Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, but now Hand of the King. Quite the rise, wouldn't you say? Now, the men, they're all leaving to head to the Riverlands. So they're getting on their horses, they're leaving the keep, and Alicent is stood there and she's alone. Her brother is gone. Her lover is gone. Her father has been sent away. She really is very isolated right now, and that is something to keep an eye on for Alicent. Now we go back to Dragonstone, where Rhaenyra is holding court at a council meeting, and there's been no word from Daemon, but she says, give him a minute, give him a chance, he'll come through for us. But in the meantime, her lords are saying, you need to use your dragons. But Rhaenyra is like, absolutely no way, not until I absolutely have to. And one thing that really struck me was when Rhaenyra was explaining her reasons for being cautious, her lords were kind of giggling. They weren't taking her seriously. Rhaenys clocked it. She just looked at them and she stared at them. This glare of, who the fuck do you think you're talking to? That is your queen. Now, Rhaenys, for all intents and purposes, is the hand of the queen. She is the person that Rhaenyra is looking to. She is the one that Rhaenyra is seeking advice from. She is Rhaenyra's support network right now because Daemon's gone. She can't really burden the kids. Corlys is away on Driftmark. Rhaenyra is very isolated as well, just like Alicent. More on that later. But she leans on Rhaenys, and Rhaenys, she has her back, and it's very much appreciated. The way that she schooled those lords. And Rhaenys, she makes a reference to King Jaehaerys, the conciliator. And she's basically using him as an example, tying the legacy of Jaehaerys, who was known for being a king during peacetime, comparing that legacy with Rhaenyra, which was a smart thing for Rhaenys to do. I do see both sides. On the one hand, Jaehaerys, he was the one that caused Rhaenys to be passed over. So I would like her to be a bit pissed off at him, but in private. And this is why I love Rhaenys. She might still be pissed off at her grandfather for doing what he did, for basically pussying out and going, the Great Council can choose because I don't have the balls to. But this is the thing. You can think all of these things about someone, but you don't have to publicise your opinions because it doesn't serve your long-term goal. If Rhaenys was to disparage Jaehaerys publicly, then she would look petty. And the lords who were sat there would have thought something of her. Now, one thing I love about Rhaenys is that she probably has awful things to say about her grandfather in private, but in public, she knows what she needs to do, which is to use everything they have to their advantage to help Rhaenyra. So she uses the memory of her grandfather, Jaehaerys I, Jaehaerys the Conciliator, and Rhaenys deliberately conflates the legacy of Jaehaerys as a peaceful man alongside Rhaenyra, saying, this is the kind of queen Rhaenyra will be if you give her the chance. So that was smart on Rhaenys' part. But privately, I was like, don't compliment that man too much. But you can bitch about him all you want in private. But in public, game face on. And Rhaenys did that. We got a brief moment of Rhaenys and Corlys. It's difficult because they're both grieving the loss of Luke. I don't think either of them are really over the loss of Laenor and Laena. And Corlys, he's just ploughing in. He's going, I've got ships to build. And Rhaenys, she's being a support for Rhaenyra. But who is supporting Rhaenys? And it's almost like the feeling I got was like, here we go again. This is just what Corlys is like. When he sets his mind on something, off he goes. Nothing Rhaenys can say will change his mind. She's been down this path before. And I think Rhaenys is genuinely frightened that she'll lose Corlys as well. It sounds glib, but people are dropping like flies. Okay, next we get this really emotional scene, which is Rhaena's departure from Dragonstone with the small children. She's basically taking them away to keep them safe because Dragonstone has proven to not be safe. And I've got so many things to say about this that I probably will do more videos on this particular scene. It was heartbreaking for Rhaena because she's having to leave her family, but she's not leaving just to go off and be away on her own. She's leaving and she's going to take on this huge responsibility of caring for her younger siblings. But the upside to this is that Rhaenyra obviously thinks very highly of Rhaena to entrust her with this task. Rhaena and Baela say goodbye to one another, and that was really interesting because they are twins, but they're very different people and they have different personalities and different ways of going about things. And Baela, she has a dragon, and at this point, Rhaena does not. And I don't think Rhaena is mad about it. I think she's hurt that she doesn't have a dragon, almost like, what's wrong with me? Why will no dragon choose me? And that makes me sad for Rhaena. But there is hope because she takes this trove of dragon eggs with her. So potentially, Rhaena may still bond with a dragon. But you've got to think about the timings. If a dragon egg was to hatch, the time it would take to grow, we're not going to have much time, put it that way. The thing is, Rhaenyra has just lost two children of her own, Luke and Visenya. And I don't have children of my own. I mean, I have a daughter, but she is of the feline variety. And she's right here. I don't know how it feels, but I can pretty much imagine that it's probably the most difficult thing in the world for a parent to deliberately part with their children, even though you're doing it for their own good, for their safety. Rhaenyra is putting them first. She's smiling. She doesn't want them to think that anything is amiss. She's trying to keep things calm. That's what a mother does. And she is mothering. I know we say that all the time, but she really is. And this must be destroying Rhaenyra inside because she lives for her children. And it's the worst thing in the world to have to be parted from them. Also, the way Rhaenyra was saying goodbye to Joffrey, I had flashbacks to her saying goodbye to Luke, and I'm sure Rhaenyra did too, especially because they look the spitting image of each other. That broke my heart. Like this is the thing. Rhaenyra is struggling and suffering and in pain. At least Alicent has some of her kids around. Rhaenyra is having to send hers away. She's already lost some of her kids. She's having to part with them because they're not safe in their own home, the place where they were the happiest. Now, Dragonstone went from being this wonderful place where they had the best time ever to now being somewhere where they're terrified to be because it's just not safe. This is very much a last resort for Rhaenyra. She does not want to part with her children, but she has to for their own safety. Okay, next we have another mothering scene, but of a different kind. We have Helena and Alicent, and basically Helena is trying to process what she's been through. I don't know if it's fully resonated yet. I'm not sure if it's sunk in. I don't know if I could ever get over that. I feel like she's numb. She's just trying to get through this. She's smiling for Jaehaera. She's trying to make sense of this in her brain. She's saying, this is what happens to children. Young children don't always make it. It's sort of rationalizing it in her head, but there's also the pain, and the pain is not rational. And I'm not sure if Helena has touched on that yet. I don't know if she's ready. But what she does do is offer forgiveness to her mother. It was basically the elephant in the room, like, are we going to talk about this? And she says to Alicent, I forgive you. Now, that could mean several different things. It could mean, I forgive you for not being there when I needed you. I forgive you for shagging the Lord Commander. Or maybe I forgive you because it wasn't your fault. This is because of other people. Maybe she blames Aegon. Maybe she blames Aemond. We don't know yet. But she doesn't hold her mother responsible. What struck me was Alicent's expression. The way Olivia Cooke plays Alicent, firstly, is brilliant. But just the expression on Alicent's face, it was very much, I can't believe you're doing that. You're being so kind and generous as to offer me forgiveness when you're going through what you're going through. It was almost like a role reversal. Like in this brief moment of time, Helena was the mother, not Alicent. Helena was providing the support, not Alicent. And that was interesting. And again, it's something to watch going forward. But the thing with Alicent is, I think she's got a lot of her own anxieties. We know when she was young, she dealt with anxiety. She would pick at her nails. That's not really changed. We see her scrubbing at her skin. Alicent knows what it's like to struggle and to try and cope and get through the day. And she's worried whether her daughter is going to be able to do the same, especially after the funeral and the way Helena expresses how awful it was to have to sit there and go through that. So this is a really intense scene between mother and daughter, and my heart breaks for them because neither one of them wanted this to happen. And it did. And now they're trying to figure out, how do we pick up the pieces? And Helena she's going through it, but the sense I get is that she's putting on a brave face, but it's going to hit her again. And I don't know whether she'll get back up after that. Moving on to Aegon, and he's getting fitted out in his Valyrian steel armor. And of course, guess who's lurking in the shadows? Of course, it's Larys Strong. He's never far away. He's always sniffing around. Now, I've been saying for a while that Larys Strong is a rotten person. He's awful. We saw what he did to his own brother and father. The man has no scruples. But what is really interesting is the way that he's behaving now towards these different characters. Because let's not forget, do you remember the foot thing? We don't know how that became a thing, but we do know Larys is manipulative. And at one point, he was on very close terms with Alicent, to the point where she was getting her feet out for him. So we're seeing it again with Aegon and how manipulative Larys Strong is being, because he's basically honing in on Aegon's biggest insecurities, and he's prodding at them, saying, you don't want people to think less of you. You don't want people to think you're weak. And he's doing this on purpose, like he's stirring the pot. But Aegon, he doesn't quite grasp what is happening. He doesn't realize who he's dealing with. He names Larys as Master of Whisperers, even though he said, my father thought there was no need for that. I mean, there is, but not Larys Strong. It's also interesting that the parallel of Rhaenyra being very proactive and sending her children away, putting herself through that pain because she knows it's for their best interests. She's taking action. She's taking steps to protect her family. Aegon is kind of being a little lazy, shall we say? He's like, that can wait till another day. Well, we're in the middle of a war, so there's not really a whole lot of time to dilly-dally about. It does seem like Aegon is unprepared for the task of being king, especially in a war. He's really out of his depth. And it makes me wonder, does Aegon have anyone with him, around him, who really looks out for him? Like anyone that he can call on to support him? I don't know. His friends, the guys that he's hanging out with, they all seem like douchebags. The people he's named to the Kingsguard, they seem like teenagers. Like they just don't know what they're doing. And so Aegon, he's really setting himself up here. Okay, moving on, we are in Fleabottom, and we meet this guy, Ulf the White. Now, he claims to be the bastard son of Baelon the Brave, who is the father of Viserys and Daemon. I don't believe that, not for a goddamn second, because first of all, Baelon the Brave was obsessed and in love with his wife and sister, Alyssa Targaryen. Now, when she dies in childbirth, Baelon is never the same. He rejects one of his sisters who comes onto him. He never takes another wife. He's basically heartbroken till the day he dies. That is what I believe anyway. I don't believe this whatsoever. I feel like this guy here, he's just trying his luck because he wants to be involved. He knows that this is an opportunity, because this is the thing with war. It's awful, but it does provide a leg up for some people, because they're mingling in this tavern, this whorehouse, with the king. So if you're an ambitious person, but you're of a very low status, you're going to try and use what you can to get a leg up. And I think that could include lying about being a secret Targaryen bastard. Also, a quick moment for Diana. That poor girl cannot catch a break. She goes from being by Aegon, to now being treated like this by the men in this whorehouse. It's just awful. This poor girl. Somebody come in and take her under their wing, please. Okay, now we get this scene where Aegon is drunk. He's stumbling through the brothel. He's basically saying, I know who to set you up with. I know just the person. Pulls back the curtain, and there we have Aemond, and he's absolutely stark bollock naked with that woman as well. This scene, I don't even know where to begin. I am going to do a whole separate discussion about this because it was so layered. Firstly, rather than protect his brother's modesty, Aegon is just sort of pointing and laughing at Aemond and humiliating him, which is exactly what he used to do when they were kids. We saw in the last episode, Aemond explaining to this woman, they used to pick on me, and Aegon was the worst of them all. And nothing's changed. And I know brothers bicker, but come on. Basically, Aegon completely humiliates Aemond in front of everybody, and he makes him feel about this big, and it's horrible. And you see this look in Aemond's eyes. You see, Ewan Mitchell, oh my God, what an actor, brilliant. You see him, his eyes start to sort of well up, like he gets emotional, but Aemond will not shed a tear, not for Aegon. Oh, over his dead body, hell no. And so you see him kind of rein it back in, and it's the moment where something shifts inside Aemond, and the dynamic between the brothers, that's never going to be the same again. And he gets up, we get a full frontal scene. I was not prepared for that. And he storms out, kind of with his head held high, with his sapphire glistening. And in that moment, it feels like Aemond has made a decision. And we see Aemond stand up, and he keeps his head held high. He's not going to be embarrassed. He is stark naked, but he just, head held high, struts out. And the look on his face is the look of somebody who is done with a person. Like, that is meant to be your brother, and this is how you treat him? For Aegon to embarrass him and to do it in a way that is so sensitive, because we know that something has happened with Aemond and that woman when Aemond was very young. So the whole thing is fucked up. And rather than being his brother's biggest champion and protector, Aegon throws Aemond under the bus for a cheap laugh. And it's not cool. And it did look like Aemond decided, you know what? I don't know whether I will have your back going forward, because this is how you treat me. Nothing's changed. In 15, 20 years, you're still the same. It also taps into how Aemond thinks he would be better as king than Aegon, because Aegon does not take it seriously. And this just proves Aemond's point. This is just such a childish thing to do, but also a very hurtful thing. And Aegon, he's not in a position where he can be like that to people. He's not got that many people around him, so you don't want to be pissing off your brother as well. But when Aemond walked away, oh, he was done. Aemond and Aegon, them two, I'm going to be watching them with a magnifying glass going forward. Then we get a shot of Rhaenyra, and she is on Dragonstone, and she's clearing away the kids' toys. It's really sad. She's really alone. This large blended family that once was, now they're all off in different places. It's very sad. And so Rhaenyra, she's just dealing with all of these emotions. She doesn't know what the right thing to do is. She's just trying to get through each day. She goes over and retrieves the letter that Alicent had written, and this time she opens the seal and she reads the letter. Now we get to a really good scene. I loved this. First of all, hi Gwen Hightower. Love to see you again. He's my new favourite. He's my new bestie. Now, there is tension between Criston Cole and Gwen. A little bit of sparring, a little bit of back and forth. And Criston Cole, he looks up and he's like, oh shit, we're not covered. And then you hear it. I also really appreciated Baela speaking in High Valyrian to Moondancer. Loved that. Criston Cole, he realizes they're exposed, so he says, get to the trees, like ride as fast as you can. And guess who comes bursting down from the skies? Oh, it's Baela Targaryen on Moondancer. I was jumping around my living room cheering for this moment. Like, yes, Baela. Like, don't go too close. Don't get too close to them at all. You remember Rhaenyra's orders, just to hover around. Of course, Baela just couldn't resist. She is very much her parents' daughter. This is exactly what Daemon would do, exactly what Laena would do. Now, they get away, they hide in the trees, and Baela returns back to Dragonstone, where she reports on what she's seen. Now, Rhaenyra looks at her like, what did I just tell you? I saw a tweet where it was like, that feeling when you realize that you have another Daemon in your house after you've already fired Daemon. Yeah, Baela is very much her father's daughter, very much, because she couldn't resist. And she says, I went after them a little bit, but I didn't go right after them. I pulled back. And Rhaenyra looks at her and says, how could you do this? How could you risk your life? I don't think she's mad at Baela for, disobeying an order. I think she's frustrated that Baela took a risk and that could have backfired and she could have lost Baela. And that was something Rhaenyra could not tolerate. And so it's a motherly instinct. It's the mother's love of, I don't want you to be hurt. I'd rather hurt myself than have you hurt. That's where Rhaenyra's coming from with her response to Baela. But Baela is the daughter of Laena and Daemon. What did she expect? In this council meeting, all the lords, they continue to harass Rhaenyra and say, you've got to use your dragons. When are you going to use them if not now? Now is the time. But Rhaenyra, she still doesn't want to do that. She looks at Rhaenys and it's sort of a unspoken communication of, we're going to try one last thing to see if we can avert all-out war. Now we're at Harrenhal and we get one of my favourite scenes. Actually, it's two scenes back to back concerning Daemon. Now, he's in his rooms and, of course, it's Harrenhal, it's leaking. And he hears this sound and he hears someone rattling on the door and he goes out and there's no one there. He follows the sound and it takes him into this room. And basically, my interpretation of this sequence is that there's something in the air. There's magic. It's something. Daemon basically, he walks in and he sees young Rhaenyra, played by Millie Alcock. Shout out to Millie. Nice to see you back, even if just for a moment. Daemon stands there and he sees young Rhaenyra and she is reattaching Jaehaerys's head, little Jaehaerys. That scene, that was hard to watch because it was so graphic, but it needed to be in a way to shock Daemon, to make him realize what he's done. Young Rhaenyra, she turns and says, you're coming and going, and I'm always the one cleaning up your mess. This is what I said about last week when Daemon and Rhaenyra had that argument. She's always cleaning up his mess. I did not know that was going to be the line that Millie said, but it's true. She always has to come in and sort everything out. Daemon has a habit of flying off and leaving Rhaenyra to pick up the pieces. And I think the thing with this particular moment and the way that Daemon reacted, the way that his eyes just filled with tears, it was a few things hitting him at once. But the whole package, it was guilt. Guilt for his involvement, his complicity in Blood and Cheese. They would not have been there if it was not for him. So even though I don't believe Daemon sent them to go after the kids, they were there because of him. And so he is complicit. He has blood on his hands. So that's the first thing. It's guilt for his involvement in Blood and Cheese. The second thing is his guilt towards Rhaenyra. He's let her down again, like he always used to. He would just go off and leave her and she again would pick up the pieces. And it's something that Daemon has to come to terms with. You can't keep doing this because Rhaenyra needs you by her side. She needs to be able to rely upon you. You can't go off doing these harebrained schemes because your wife is the one who has to pick up the pieces. At what point are you going to grow up and take some responsibility? At what point are you going to trust that your wife might know best? I honestly don't think Daemon anticipated any of this. This was not part of his plan whatsoever. His reaction affirms that for me. Seeing young Rhaenyra holding Jaehaerys, cradling him like a baby, it was just so overwhelming and so intense that it was like the guilt was hitting Damon at 100 miles an hour, and he was realizing what he had done. The problem is, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. But yeah, Damon feels bad. He drops his sword. He's overwhelmed. And what's interesting is we then segue into this second part of the scene where Damon finds himself in the Godswood outside in Harrenhal, and he has an interaction with this young girl who we met earlier on in the episode, Alys Rivers. Well, we didn't meet her, we saw a glimpse of her, but if you know who she is, you know who she is. Now, the interesting thing, and I did a TikTok about this, the first part of these two scenes with Damon and young Rhaenyra, it's almost him realizing where he's gone wrong, that he's fucked up, that he's screwed the pooch. The second part of these two-parter scenes, it's Damon actually doing something good, doing the right thing, because what Alys Rivers says to him is, you're gonna die here at Harrenhal. So Damon, he knows his days are numbered. But what does he do? He doesn't flee this time. He doesn't run away. He goes, you know what? Right, that's my fate. I can't change it. So in the interim, I will use every ounce of energy, every last piece of me to do what I can for Rhaenyra and their family. In these back-to-back scenes, the first one is very much Damon coming to terms with what he has done, coming to terms with his own guilt. The second part of this back-to-back is more about Damon going forward, and it did feel like a shift for me because he appears outside in the Godswood in Harrenhal, and he sees this young woman who had been there previously when he was talking to Simon Strong, and we know she's Alys Rivers. And Alys is rumoured to dabble in a bit of magic here and there, so bear that in mind. She says to Damon, you're going to die here at Harrenhal. Now, we don't know obviously what Damon's going to do. This is just my conjecture. I think this is a turning point for Damon because he knows his days are numbered. He knows he's not going to make it out. So he does everything he can for Rhaenyra, for his children. He's like, okay, I might not make it out, but let me help them to survive at least. Let me take out as many enemies as I can. Let me go after Aemond and Vhagar because they are the biggest threat. Whatever I can do, he wants to do it so that his death will not be in vain. I can't wait to see more scenes with Alys Rivers because she's a creepy motherfucker and I kind of love her. So I'm excited to see what she does. Okay, back to Dragonstone, and Rhaenyra approaches Mysaria and says, I need a favour. I need your help getting into King's Landing. Rhaenyra has decided she's going to go and speak to Alicent. She's willing to risk it all, to risk her life, her safety. She's going to go all that way, and she's exposing herself. If one person sees her, she's risking all of this, but she's doing it because she believes that there is a chance. If she can speak to Alicent, they can come together and they can bring this war to a close. So she's smuggled into King's Landing dressed as a nun because the only time Alicent is alone is when she is in the Sept. So Rhaenyra makes her way through. It's a miracle no one spots her. I mean, it's not like they have social media, but she is the princess, she's the queen now. She's known, she is a face. There was a chance she could have been spotted. So she arrives inside the Sept and she sees Alicent. So she goes over and Alicent kind of looks and sees there's someone sitting down next to her. What was so interesting is that immediately it was like they both were on high alert. Alicent was like, and Rhaenyra was like, I've got to have the night, keep calm. She was basically letting Alicent know, don't scream. Because if you do, let's have a conversation. Now, firstly, before I get into the actual context of this scene, shout out to the cinematography department, the people in charge of getting these incredible images. The way that it started out really far back and you saw them quite far away, and then as the scene progressed, it got closer and closer onto their faces and it became more emotional, more intimate. And Rhaenyra asks the million-dollar question, just how long have you been plotting behind my back? When did when did this all begin? How far back are we talking here? The crux of the issue is there's no trust left between these two. Rhaenyra does not trust Alicent. Alicent does not trust Rhaenyra. And they're like two ships passing in the night. They just can't get on the same page. Everyone is really caught up in their feelings, but Rhaenyra is trying to get through to Alicent and say, look, can we get on the same page? Can we stop this? It's already gone too far. And this is the thing. Alicent says, there's too much time that's passed, too much water under the bridge. This is they're not just talking about things in a sort of anecdotal sense. This is real, proper pain. And it's easy to say on paper, okay, well, this is what we should do. But in the moment, when your feelings are involved, it's not so easy. Now, Rhaenyra says, look, I spoke to my father a few hours before his death. He reaffirmed his support for me. Don't you remember him dragging his carcass all the way through the throne room? Do we not remember that whole episode? He said, it is me. I am the one. And that's where we get the gag. Alicent says, no. He meant Aegon. He mentioned the prince who was promised. And that is when Rhaenyra realizes what's happened. That all of this has happened because of a misunderstanding. Now, you could make the argument that regardless of Alicent's involvement, the other members of the Green Council were making moves to usurp Rhaenyra anyway. So, in a way, Alicent's misunderstanding doesn't really matter, but it does because, she is using that to back her claim for Aegon. But by mentioning the prince who was promised, that reference specifically, that is what lets Rhaenyra know, you've got the wrong end of the stick. He didn't mean your Aegon, he meant Aegon the Conqueror. Alicent mentions the prince who was promised, and she doesn't really know what he's on about. She just heard that and the word Aegon, but Rhaenyra knows what it means. She knows it was Viserys referring to the Song of Ice and Fire, the prince who was promised, the person who would unite the realm to defend against the long night. That is coming. Winter is coming. Now, Alicent, she has not got a clue about any of this. And so it's Rhaenyra's face. She realizes, you've got the wrong end of the stick. You've got the wrong Aegon. Easily done in this universe because there's too bloody many of them. But Alicent, her face, the way Olivia Cook portrayed it, it was so subtle, but it was that dawning realization of, have I done all of this and I've got the wrong end of the stick? Because she has. But the problem is, can Alicent accept she's made a mistake? Will that change things, or will she just double down? It seems like the latter, because she says, it's too late. There's too much that's happened. My father, he's gone. Kristen Cole, he's off leading an army. Aemond is doing his thing. Aegon's doing his. It's too late. Like, it's closing the stable door after the horse has bolted. Alicent says, look, there's too much that's gone on. There is no going back. And the problem with that is, as a viewer, well, as a book reader, with hindsight, I know things are going to get much worse. And here is Alicent saying, oh, well, too much has happened. Girl, there's way more that's going to come down the pipeline, and you are going to regret not taking Rhaenyra up on this offer. Because she gets up and walks away. And I was like, no, I understand being overwhelmed and just wanting to remove yourself from the situation. That I get. But the problem is, it doesn't fix things. You've got to be really practical. Alicent needed to stay and finish out the conversation. And by walking away, it's left Rhaenyra with this, well, what do I do now kind of thing. She can't win. Nothing Rhaenyra does is going to be good enough because she's risked her life coming here again as a peace envoy, despite everything that's been done to her. And she's still being rejected. And so we end with Rhaenyra having this expression of, well, now what? How do I go ahead? What do I do now? How do I resolve this? Because I think she really hoped and believed and had faith that the feelings that used to exist with Alicent and Rhaenyra, that they would still be there. But Alicent has locked them away. Alicent's got a lot on her plate. She's got a lot in her mind that's going on. And it's just, this is too much. She can't process it, because I do think Alicent feels very guilty and she's just overwhelmed. So she walked away. But Rhaenyra is not a mind reader. She can't know that. You have to have these awkward conversations, these uncomfortable conversations, because you need to move past the issue. By walking away, that doesn't happen. And so Rhaenyra is like, well, what did diplomacy get me? It got me nowhere. What about being a good person? What about being decent? What about showing caution? Sending my boys as envoys, specifically not to engage. She didn't even get her son's body back. She couldn't even hold a proper funeral. That's the thanks she got for sending her children as envoys, strictly envoys. So we come to the end of this episode with Rhaenyra at this crossroads. What is she going to do? She can't keep doing the same thing because it's not working. And she's tried everything. She's gone through every possible solution. She can't seem to make any headway. And this is the crux of the issue, because I was speaking about this on TikTok the other day. There's only so much Rhaenyra can do. She can't resolve this war on her own so long as the Greens keep prodding at her. At some point, Alicent, Otto, Aegon, Aemond, Criston Cole, one of them is going to have to do the decent thing. One of them is going to have to de-escalate, because until any of them do, the war will continue, because Rhaenyra is not the aggressor in this situation. She's not the antagonist. And by Alicent walking away, what's Rhaenyra meant to think? Like, I've tried to be peaceful. I've tried speaking to you. I've risked my life coming to you, and it's not good enough. And so going forward, the preview we got for episode 4, it looks like Rhaenyra is pretty much going, you know what? Maybe it is time to unleash the dragons. And obviously, that's not a good thing for anybody, but you can't be a doormat. You can't just sit there and let them come for you. So Rhaenyra and Alicent, the whole thing, it's a mess. So that's pretty much it for episode 3 of season 2 of House of the Dragon. One more episode and we're at the halfway point, which blows my mind. Do please comment and like and subscribe and all those good things as I try and grow this channel. Thank you guys for your amazing support. I know there was a lot of comments on the episode 2 video. I've been away. I haven't had a chance to go through the comments, but I'm going to. I will get back to all of you. But please do like this video, comment, do all that good stuff. And thank you so much for supporting me and listening to me ramble on. It is very much appreciated. And I'll see you guys next week.